He was like, how do you have 14,000 followers? Things like that.
Yeah.
They're velvety. It's a warm velvety thing. It's like canned. There are some that are rather. This is a minor microwave hot water bottles that I put on my lap. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, he learned that art. Yeah, but he's the most loving. Yeah. Well, he was the first child. Only likes me, and then Wendell gives me the opportunity, like anybody who comes to Wendell goes to him. He's a little not mature, but.
I had one that was good too, and that's why she went over and found me in the past she had. It was hard.
If my panelists are ready, I'm going to go ahead and get started. It is 6:30. I want to start by thanking all of you for coming out on this super cold Thursday evening. Very important for our community to see so many smiling faces, and I appreciate that. We are going to be hosting this panel on higher education. But first, I'd like to introduce our panelists who have come here today. We'll go ahead and start with Camille down on the end. If you can give us your name and give us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so hi, I'm Camille. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, but I am a SEMO student. I am a sophomore. I went to public school for high school. I went to private school for middle school, elementary school, so I'm kind of a unique person when it comes to the education system. But I'm on the debate team at SEMO. I'm also part of College Democrats. I have my hand in a few things, and I have student loans.
I'm Robin Smith. I'm a faculty member for Leadership Middle and Secondary in the College of Education, Health, and Human Studies. And I help undergraduate and then graduate students prepare to be teachers in your public schools or private schools.
I'm Larry Bohannon, and I do the same thing. I'm the program coordinator for the elementary department. I do not have any student debt, but I have two children. One is a pharmacist, and he has a huge student debt. And then I have another one that didn't have one, but I guess he wanted one, so he came back to SEMO to get another degree, and now he has a student debt.
I have to say, I have 3 adult children. I'm going to go off Larry. I have 3 adult children, all gone to college. 2 have paid off their student debt, and 1 will probably be about 50 when she pays off her debt, because she went on to grad school at a very expensive institution. So.
And I'm Kathy Ellis. I'm running for the Missouri 8th Congressional District. By trade, I'm a clinical social worker, so I have an MSW, and my undergraduate degree is in administration of justice. And I have a niece and a nephew who are very, very burdened with debts already. My niece is graduating from medical school at the end of this semester, so she will have a great deal of debt, even though she was able to get a lot of help from the zoo. It's still going to be a burden. So I'm very interested in this. I come from a family of teachers, and I think that education, higher education, is one of the most important things that we have going for us in this country, and we need to treat it respectfully, and we need to make sure that everybody gets a chance.
And I am Zachary Hunt. I am the moderator for this forum for the evening. I'm a graduate of SEMO, class of 2018. I'm currently a teacher. I teach online, I do tutoring, I'm doing a bunch of different things. But I was fortunate enough to have 2 of the professors at this forum teach me at my time at SEMO, and I am very excited to have all of our panelists here this evening. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And I kind of want to start with the big picture, and then we'll kind of get into some of the more nitty-gritty details of higher education. But my first question that I want to throw to the panelists, and feel free to chime in, but I want to discuss the challenges that are facing our prospective students, the students we have now. So what do you think are the most pressing challenges that face students in terms of getting access to education? So before they even walk in the door, what are the challenges that face students in higher education, just in general? What challenges do you see?
I would say the first thing is the financial challenge. You know, that's one of the things that we hear the most about, and I think that we can do a better job of working with students when they first come into a college environment to make sure that they know what they're getting themselves into.
I would say from like a recent graduate perspective, like going from junior year onward, the only thing that you think about is getting into college, that you don't look at how much it costs. And then when you get to the point where you're applying, you have to pay for the ACT, the SAT, the application fee, you have to look at the Common App. There's just so many things that you weren't prepared for, that college in itself is not the main issue. It's rather, how can I afford to even apply to college? I don't have a job, I have to take out all these loans, my parents can't afford it. And then you have a lack of a support system at the high school level. Like, I was fortunate to have dual credit going into SEMO, so I'm a sophomore, junior-ish now, but other kids don't have that. So they're gonna have to pay for four full whole years of school on top of summer jobs or any other expenses that might come up. So you have just all these unexpected things that we aren't prepared for. So that's the financial aspect, but you also have like the ACT. A lot of schools do a good job at preparing their kids, but you have some students who may not get the test scores they want, and they don't have a backup plan. And then you have the students that are like, well, I don't want to go to community college because that's not what I wanted to do, but they have to, and now it's just an emotional burden on top of that.
I agree with all that, and so I won't add to that. The thing that I see as a big challenge for some of the students, and I come from a public school retirement, I was an assistant superintendent. What I'm seeing is they cannot balance everything that they're trying to do. You know, they're having to work because of student loans, but then they've got a little bit of freedom, and then housing, it seems like they try to find housing that's more economical, so they're living off campus, so they've got transportation, just all these things, and some of them just fall, they just collapse. And so and then now they have a loan for that first semester, and they're not even going to continue, and then they've got to find a job and hope, and then try to pay it off. So I see some of those as challenges to accessing the whole thing. I mean, they can get here, but then they drop out, things happen.
Right, I kind of want to piggyback on that because I graduated from our elementary education department, and as part of that final semester is student teaching, and that is a full-time commitment that is very difficult to manage financially. You have someone, you have people that have gone through the system just to get to that last semester, and I'm still paying for that now. I graduated in 2018 at the end of that, and I'm still paying for, I could only work, luckily I was working online, in the mornings before I went to my student teaching placement, but, there are lots of situations where students have these full-time commitments on top of being a student because the cost of living is so high that you can't afford to take that time off to really just go to school. And if you have kids, we're going to discuss later about non-traditional students, but if you have all these other commitments, I think that is a big challenge for students to be able to, again, even get their foot in the door, because there's this overwhelming sense of how am I going to make this work? And especially for people that try to go to school later in life, how am I going to be able to manage all of the things that I need to do in my personal life and go to school at the same time and be able to afford it, not just while I'm in school, but as soon as the loan officers start knocking on the door asking where the money is. So I just know for me personally, that's my biggest challenge in terms of making it work.
Because Larry and I come from the education department, and Zach, Southeast is unique to some universities in that we have a practicum or field that they graduate to doing more and more time in field. And so in my department, as a junior, you do Tuesday, Thursday mornings, 8 to noon in field. And then the next semester, it's Monday through Friday, 8 to noon in field. And then they go to student teaching, which is all day in field. So to hold down a part-time job and be successful in field, if you're working very late in the evening, which many of our students do, then they have to maintain a very high GPA to stay in the teacher ed program. We can see our students struggle. As faculty, I know that I have encountered students who did not calculate, and it's through no fault of anyone, it's things that happen. There are fees that come along for students. In our department, the fees are testing to make sure that you have a rounded education at a certain level. And oftentimes students say, I can't afford this. As folks who are working, it might not sound like a lot of money to us to pay $100 to take a test. But as a student who is already stretching every dollar and perhaps has a loan package that didn't calculate enough money, that's a lot of dollars. And then their certification tests also cost extra money. So I see my students struggle with small fees because it's the 100th small fee that's come along. It's not the first one, and that's hard for them to deal with. And to the credit of faculty at Southeast, and I'm sure it's in many departments, not just ours, oftentimes faculty cover some of those fees. Because someone isn't going to go to the next level because of a $45 fee that they had not counted on. And that's just how teachers are. That's how teachers are.
I might just add, for the audience to know, I've been at the university 13 years. 13 years ago, the person that brought the teachers in, future teachers, into the education program, actually told them they cannot hold a job. You will not make it through this education program. You cannot have an outside job. I'm just going to tell you, your studies will suffer. Your everything will suffer. There is no way we could say that. I mean, they're not working to drive a bigger car or to have more spending money. They're truly working to have a little bit because those loans are there. So we no longer say that. And some of them are holding 3 jobs. As you said, you were doing it online before you went to student teach.
Yeah, I was teaching part-time on the weekends for as long as I could, and then at a certain point, I just could not manage it. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure.
Something that you said earlier, I think there's also, we're seeing it certainly in our high schools where we have a number of students that are homeless. What are you seeing in this area, around this campus? Are there students that really don't have any place to live, that, and food, and what's being done about that?
I don't know about homeless. I know one of my students told me the other day, or last semester, he had X number of money to eat. And I was listening to him telling me, he said, no, I cannot do that. I can't give that. I have this amount of money to eat, and I've got this. And he goes, if I keep on, I will be eating Pop-Tarts. So I think that's where their nutrition suffers for it. But as far as homeless, I don't know. They might be just living with a friend, or somebody's letting them sleep on the couch. So they might be homeless, but I'm not aware of it.
I think that in high school I had about 3 to 4 friends that experienced homelessness during high school, and our counselors were pretty good at finding them either temporary housing or figuring out something with the district to get them where they are. I think SEMO does a pretty good job at supporting students. We have a food pantry, we have a career closet, so that if you don't have those resources, you can get them. So I applaud the university for that. But for making college more accessible for those students, that's going to be a hurdle, because these kids don't have a mailbox to receive applications. They may not have access to internet, and you can't sleep at the school. So there just needs to be a city, state, and a university discussion about how that should be managed, because the high school cannot do that by themselves. The high school teachers are already struggling. They already have to sometimes buy their own school supplies. They already act as counselors and parents to kids who don't have those in their lives. And teachers have so much going on already that they can't finance another child on top of themselves and their spouse and their kids if they have any and their student loans. I had a lot of teachers in my school who were freshly out of college who came to teach there for their first job, and so they already have $30,000 of debt to handle. And now you have a homeless kid who's like, I can't eat today because my parents are working a whole 12-hour shift and they aren't going to be able to bring food home until 5 a.m. And you just look at these kids and you just physically can't help. And so it's just, the university does a good job, but there are still ways that we could improve.
Well, piggybacking on that, I think it's important too that we're in a college town, so we're fortunate that we have a big enough university that can provide those services. But I think of schools in rural areas, like especially your trade schools, your community colleges, where they may not have the same ecosystem and their students may not have the same support systems. You know, I think about how many students there may be that would like to go and, you know, make that next step, but they can't. So, I mean, I think that's important to consider too, that we are fortunate. You know, I can say just as a senior graduate, like I am fortunate that I was a school that was invested in making sure that I had the resources that I needed, that I always knew that even if I didn't use that resource, it was there for somebody else who may need it. So I am thankful for that. But yeah, I do think about students that come from these other areas that may not have that same system. So I think it's good to keep that in mind as well when we're thinking about higher education.
And you know, we have Jefferson County has Jefferson College, and of course we have Middle Area College as well. And of course that's also an issue of transportation. You know, if somebody's coming from pretty far, that's expensive. That's another expense that one doesn't necessarily factor in when you're looking about where you're going. So, you know, there's so many other things, as you're saying, it's like you still think about that.
Yeah, that was a problem for me at SEMO. My car, a Dodge Neon, it lasted as long as it could, but there were times that like I couldn't afford to get repairs done. So, I mean, again, fortunately SEMO has a transit service, or, you know, I've always lived relatively close to the campus, so I could walk there. But, you know, for people that are living off of campus or, you know, things like that, that's a good point. Transportation's an issue too. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next part. We're gonna go ahead and just tackle this behemoth head on, student loan debt. So there are a lot of solutions, especially during this election cycle, that are being floated around. Some candidates believe that maybe we should pay for the first 2 years of community college or trade school, that should be free and accessible. Some candidates on the other side of things believe that even our four-year institutions, our four-year public institutions should be free. So there are a lot of different ideas, and I don't expect any of our panelists, myself especially, to be any experts on, you know, student loan debt or anything like that. But I mean, we've all experienced it in some form or another, whether it's us personally, students we've had, you know, children. So what do you see as a possible solution to the student debt crisis, and how do you think we can make steps to make it more affordable for more people to have access to it?
This might not be popular, what I'm going to say, but I think college is great, and I think it is the answer for many. But I do believe that there is a vocational education that plays a role, and some students would fare better to get a trade and work from that. So with that being said, public school is free public school, and we don't even in Missouri get all the allocations for public school that our foundation formula does not work I mean, it's a great foundation formula, it's just not fully funded. And I lived that life for 28 years. So, to say college would be free, I just don't know how that would work. So I don't know, there's other people that probably been putting paper and pencil together and they have an idea. I think that, it's the interest rate. Some people had interest rates way back when, and theirs is like, I don't even know what the percentage is. I know what my own child's is, and I know what my parent loan was for him, and then I still know what he owes, as a pharmacist, because he went to a private school. But, if we tried to consolidate one time, my wife and myself being a teacher, we got this real good interest rate on some of his loans because they were taken out, Mohila, whatever. So we got this. My wife called up to the university, and this guy said, "You need to consolidate these, and we'll reduce it." They consolidated it and reduced it just to 1.2 point. We would have been better to have done this Mohila thing with being a teacher. So she said, "I don't want to do that. Then I want to go back to my other way." And they said, "No, you've already done it. There's no correction." So we paid. She calculated how many more thousands of dollars we paid on those two loans because they were like different parts that came together. That we would have not had to do had someone told us. So we didn't, you talked about like counselors can't do it all. Well, we were leaning on the St. Louis College Pharmacy. We were leaning on their direction, and we thought we were doing everything. And then we found this. She found this. Just somehow someone said, "You're a teacher. Your interest rate should be 5%. Well, those loans are much different than the ones that were the other. But I've read where some have loans that the percentage was way back when. I don't know how they ever get out of the hole. I mean, I don't know, percentage 21% or astronomical numbers. I don't know how you ever get it paid down because it's like this. So anyway, I think that maybe we need to look at reducing the interest rates on the loan or refinancing, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think, the other thing, I'm a very strong proponent of, we should be able to provide at the community college level, a free education, whether it is vocational or whether it is not. As far as university education, four-year program, one of the things that I think is something that we need to pay attention to is how we can, we live in a predominantly rural area. The 8th district is a predominantly rural area. And the unfortunate thing is the state of Missouri does not respect teachers, and it does not respect education. And so you see cut after cut after cut, lie after lie after lie about the funding, and of course we're fully funding it. Well, no, they're not. Let's face facts, they're not gonna do it. We have to make sure that we get the message across that we're tired of this. It's time to make some change in this system so that we have truly equal opportunity for people to take advantage of a good education. Now, having said that, for a four-year education, I really strongly believe that if you want to appreciate your education, you have to have skin in the game. And so, if we can develop a system whereby we have students who can stay in their own towns, do what they were trained to do, for a period of time to work off that debt, I think we are giving people the opportunity to learn that this is a valuable thing, and this is what I'm giving up of my life to do this. But we also have a student who is very, very different from someone who has a college education that's totally paid for. We will have somebody that has a much better awareness of the struggles of other people and has much better awareness of how we all need to work together to solve some of these educational problems. So I'm looking at anything that I can see that would be helpful in that way to give the assistance that is needed, but then also you work it out, work it off in your community with the support of your community as well. Part of that would be also including people could volunteer to give a bedroom to somebody who's going to be working there. It saves money and they can, really work some of that down.
I wonder how internships would play a role in something like that. Like, I feel like those, internships are so unpaid right now. Like, most of them are unpaid. And so I'm just wondering if that might be some part of the solution to like maybe the government subsidizing internships in a way to pay for their college. Or, and especially if we're talking about the first 2 years being paid for, that's a great start, and then the internship, you intern during those 2 years, maybe your next 2 years are paid off.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think we have to have all options on the table to see what will really work in what areas, because it may be very different geographically what would work in some areas.
Well, and piggybacking on that, if students want credit for their internship, they're actually paying the school to have that internship if they want to grade for it. So that goes there, they could potentially be going more in debt in order to get job experience.
I would say as a former intern, my school, we required an internship or a capstone like thing for the second semester of your senior year. And my internship site did a great job of saying, we're not gonna pay you for Monday through Friday, but we'll pay you $15 an hour for as many hours as you work over the weekend. So I was really blessed to have that. But there are also other schools who are like, you'll do internships when you go in the job market. Like, we just can't give you the opportunity. So I was able to save up. I also got scholarship money. I did girls state. I did debate. I went to nationals. So like, I was really blessed with having a support system that gave me that. But there are some students who don't get scholarship money. They get Pell Grants, and that's all they can cover, and the school can't afford to meet that gap. So they take out Parent Plus loans. They wanted me to take out like a $15,000 plus loan every year. I can't afford that. I'm in a single parent household. Like, we can't do that. And so I just took out loans. And I think I have like $5,500 a year, which is like not that bad, but it's gonna add up, and then the debt's gonna add up, and it's just gonna get worse. And so I think that we need to focus on having the state uplift its A+ program, and have that apply for high school, because there are students who dual do credit who can't get that degree until they go to a four-year university. And SEMA does a great job of having their regional campuses have, I think it's for the Kennett and Sykeston campuses, you can do your A+, but a lot of schools don't talk about that, and then you just have students coming to four-year universities who can't use their A+ because they weren't told that it only applies to community college. So I think that expanding A+ should definitely be on the table for anyone in Missouri government, because that's a great way to have students feel motivated to go to college and not just give up and be like, well, I just have to work a full-time job for 50 hours to be able to think about surviving and then going to college.
I wanna, my son, went to Truman, and he could use his A+ at a four-year college. So I know that if that has been done, that now for South Missouri State and for us, it's Sykeston or Kennett, that's where they can do their 2 years and get their money. But some of them want to start on main campus just like everyone else. So my question would be, how did Truman get to do that? Truman State get to have the A+, and I know that was one of the things that appealed to us to go to, for him to go to Truman, was that he had those monies, to be used. So why can that not go to a regional? I mean, why can't it go to a regional campus or big?
They gave me a convoluted answer. They were like, it's in like the law for the state, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna Google that because I have homework.
Representative Kevin Wyndham just wrote some changes to the A+ program, I believe. I don't know where they're at in the House, but he would be the best person to ask about where the program stands, and what some of the state rules are, and what some of the future proposed changes could be or are.
Yeah, I love Kevin. I interned for him, so I texted him.
We use the A+. I'm a professor in nursing at CMO, and with RN students that come back with a bachelor's, they were Three Rivers students, and so they transitioned to our completion program at Southeast. And this was about 10 years ago. We were able to use A+ funding, but it shifted. Something happened. It was a legislation shift, and so I know it went away. So it's been back and forth like ping pong balls, and hasn't really been addressed real aggressively head on. And I think it is one of those things that we need to take a look at and try to
Well, the A+ plus to me benefits the schools. I was in charge of secondary, so it benefits there because they learn to do volunteer hours. Some of them even learn their career, what their passion's gonna be because they're doing some preschool work or working with children. That's what they become teachers. So I think it benefits them, but I also think it benefits the university. I just didn't know why it, I didn't know when the shift happened where we can't use it everywhere.
The last 2 years, it shifted. Now, something else that is happening in our state, is apprenticeship, kind of activities, in nursing. The State Board of Nursing has, just funded, with some more tax dollars, a, demonstration project with, Crowder College, on looking at an apprenticeship model for nursing students that are in an associate program, where they're actually in a class and they're doing their clinicals and they're getting paid while they're doing their clinicals. It kind of goes back to our old days in diploma nursing when we used to, nurses used to do that and get paid. They didn't get paid much, but they did get paid. So that's happening right now in Crowder College, which I'm not sure if that's a state facility. But anyway, it is apprenticeship models. Kentucky has a pretty, it's a program that we looked at and determining what to do in our state, and I know other states have become more, so it's trades like nursing and other, technical programs, that are able to do that, and it seems to be done in Kentucky, and it's done very well.
I think my concern with the apprenticeship idea is that if it is community-based, I don't think our community will remove barriers for people who are typically not included in higher education. So my department houses the TRIO program, where the whole goal is to get more people who are underrepresented in higher education to the PhD and master's level. The university had to discontinue our Upward Bound program, which means that there's not a transition program from high school to college anymore. And that's not only a huge barrier in getting people to college, but I think it's also important to note that for people who get there and don't have that transition, half of our university population is first generation. They don't know how to navigate the system. I came out of the university with $30,000 in debt because I'm first generation and had no idea how to apply for scholarships or that resources were available for me. So the problems for me are really intertwined, that unless we solve the community's barriers as far as poverty, and even I guess to some extent you would say racism, that it's gonna continue to be an issue.
I want to piggyback off that because I was a first generation too, and I came out $50,000 in debt because I spent 6 years in college. I came from a family that was working class, that my mother made less than $30,000 a year and supported 2 children by herself. And so when I think I like your point about we need to have skin in the game in order to appreciate the education. And I think the people that I notice that don't have as much skin in the game are the people that are privileged enough to never have to pay for their college in the first place. Because either your parents are paying for it, or you made a perfect score on the ACT because you grew up in a stable household and you had the time and you had the money to be able to invest in those resources. So really, the people that need to be taken care of the most are the working class and those that are minorities that are underserved in the community. So we don't end up with $30,000 to $50,000 in debt for a bachelor's degree. Like, it's insane. So my first semester, I actually had a full ride. And I don't tell this story very much because it's very shameful for me, but I had a full ride scholarship for SEMO to cover all my tuition. But I was pulling 18 hours that first semester, plus working 35 hours a week at McDonald's. Had no idea how to balance that because I had to make a car payment for the only car that I'd ever had that was keeping me on campus and being able to go back and forth between work and the campus, and I lost a scholarship after that first semester because I did not know that I could drop classes before a certain period of time, and I didn't know that I could stay at 12 hours and still make it full time and keep the funding.
Yeah, and I think, we're at a disadvantage in a lot of the rural areas of this district, and just in terms of any transitional information going into college. I can remember, going to a rural high school, and I got out, and, the guidance counselor didn't spend any time with me. I mean, I was the third, was number 3 in the class, but I guess they didn't think, I don't know. But at that point in time, time, you know, you kind of just, when I was going to the University of Missouri St. Louis, that was all I could afford. And the only way that I could really afford that was to drive there every day. So I did about 125 miles round trip every day to go in. And so then you don't know, you know, you're just kind of floating around. So even back then, as long ago as that was, you know, it was a problem then as well, you know, and it remains a problem. And we can't have this conversation without bringing in income inequality here, because that's another big issue. It's probably too big to tackle tonight, but it's hanging around the periphery at all times.
So, I have a different perspective maybe. I wish that we could offer free community college to everyone, but free, somebody is paying for it. I like the idea that you could, if you were going to community college and you were trying to get an associate's, and you could somehow offset that with work balance, where some of that, where you could pay some tuition and some would be forgiven for the amount of time that you put into that particular field. I like that idea.
Like a work study.
Yeah, kind of like a work study. I like that idea. So I have 3 adult children. One went 4 years at SEMO. One went 2 years at MAC and 4 years at SEMO. She changed her degree choice several times. She has the biggest student loan debt. Who's responsible for that? She is. She did not stay committed to a major, and we talked to her about that. Every time you change, this puts you behind. And then we have one who could have gone to SEMO on scholarship and chose to go to UMR, we'll never call it MST, and so went to UMR and won a degree from engineering there. Could have gone to SEMO for 2 years and transferred to UMR, come out way ahead in the debt area, but made a decision to go to UMR. So my guy who went to SEMO for 4 years had to do an internship in, he was placed in Jeff City, and he lived in not very nice circumstance, and he made it through. He did not get paid, but he had worked a lot of extra hours to try to make it through on his internship without having to work extra hours in Jeff City because of the type of internship he had. It was with the State House. And so we saw things from his perspective. Our guy who went to UMR lived in a dorm because they were required to, and it was very expensive. And then as soon as he could, he moved off campus and he lived in a 3-bedroom house with 7 guys. Okay, and cut down his expenses, but still came out with significant student debt. And then our daughter, who went to MAC and played softball for MAC and had scholarship, did not leave MAC with an associate's because she changed her major, came to SEMO, had to do an internship in her program. Her internship did not pay her, but it did provide her free housing and food. So that's huge. That was huge. We have a very different perspective where I think so many people, or so many of our students have struggle is when you want something so bad. I want a college degree. I know I need a degree I want to be an accountant, and I know I've got to have my business degree to do it. So they see that prize. When they're signing their name on those student loans, it's just numbers. And nobody's sitting down and saying, you're going to have to earn this to make this payment. And so I was a first-gen college student. I took out student loans, and my parents never said, Robin, you're gonna have to do this to make this payment. I mean, they didn't understand that. That wasn't in their wheelhouse. And my husband had student loan, and we lived a very meager lifestyle for 12 years after we graduated. But we made it. I think.
But now it's not.
Now it's not.
It's not 12 years.
It's 25 years.
It's
right.
30.
So
50.
maybe a solution is to look at a combination of what you're saying, Miss Ellis, and where you have work study, and maybe what you're saying, where students have a reduced percentage, you know, a reduced interest. I mean, nobody can handle, I did some calculations, cause I don't wanna embarrass Zach. So I did some calculations before I came, and, some of these interests are $67,000 in interest. If you took out all you could every year to go to SEMO for 4 years, that'd be 72 grand. That's what SEMO's cost was, about 17 grand a year, and that's not a very expensive institution. And so, if you did that at 6% and 25-year loan, it's $67,000 in interest. And I think whenever students see that carrot and they want that degree so bad, those are just numbers. And so we have to figure out how to make that easier and not just numbers.
And educate them. You know, being first generation, some of these students, parents don't even know. They're looking at this. The student is coming home telling these parents, well, I can get this and this and this, and I can get the max amount, and that way you won't have to do anything. So the parents are going, oh, okay.
Yeah,
you know,
get the max, get the max.
They're like, okay. And then those students, then maybe they do get a job to be a little bit of spending money, but then it's over, and they have, 6 months, and then all of a sudden they come in, and these parents didn't even understand the lingo and the language. Coming from public school, like I did, and in charge of secondary, I heard some talk about guidance counselors. You know, some of them are worth their amount, way worth more than what they're paid. But then others, some students get a lot of help. They guide them and lead them. Others, it's stuff they're on their own. So I don't know what onus needs to be put on the schools that these students have to see that, and in their classes in high school that they're taking for finance or whatever more, they have to learn what a loan will do, and that this will compound and those numbers like that might scare them. I don't even think they're aware of that. I don't even think my own were my pharmacist. I mean, he's married, has 3 children. He's like, well, Dad, you know, and he is very. I mean, he's working it down, but that's just his loan. I paid $60,000 of parent loan, so I'm thinking, well, you know, and that's just his part left for him, and it's way over, 6 digits. So we've got that going on, and then you said work study. I like that, and you said something about lower economic status, different races. Sikeston has now begun a Grow Your Own for teachers. I know Fort Zumwalt has that. That way you're telling them, if you'll come back and give us at least 5 years, we'll pay your loan, or we'll pay off your school. We have to do that. They're not going to come back to our area. I mean, this is just my son's class. His friends that were at our house all the time. Not one of them are back in Sikeston. They're in St. Louis, or they're in Cape here. They are not back there. And I mean, and some of them, you're thinking, how are we going to grow our little community if no one wants to come back to it? So, but Debbie, you had your
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, for me, it's the state dedication to education. And that's what we're missing. SEMO, back in 1993, the state paid 83% of the budget. Now it's down to about 37%. So we're, President Dobbins always expressed it, we're public, but we have to act like a private institution. And so my only concern with some of what you're saying, I agree 100%. We already have public, if it would ever work, public student loan service, loan forgiveness, is that you're basically saying you're going to tell people what they can study. And as someone who believes in liberal arts, I don't want someone telling me that we're only going to fund certain, because that's what our governor is currently doing with this workforce development, and he only wants to put money into stuff. Nixon back in the day said he wanted 60% of Missourians to have some sort of advanced degree, either associates or higher. So for me, it's got to be at a higher level of commitment. I appreciate everything, because I think if you can get doctors, if you can get lawyers, if you can get accountants, anybody to come back to the community, but you can't, and that may draw some of them, but that's not going to draw everybody, and it doesn't mean they should be left out of the picture of how we can fund higher education. And so for me, because I've been teaching at SEMO, I was the first generation, I didn't have a car, I walked everywhere I went. So I understand and I see the pressure my students are under. So for me, it's got to be a higher level conversation, not just the state of Missouri, because it's got to be a nationwide. Like, I know we got to think of the state of Missouri, but what can we do on a nationwide level? Because it's $1 trillion debt. And if that crashes, you want to see an economic downturn. That is going to. I mean, part of me wants to tell all students, just stop paying your debt because they'll start listening to us because they ain't doing it.
That's a good point.
I have paid. I mean, I posted on Facebook the other day. I didn't have much debt from undergrad, but because I wanted to get a master's and a PhD, which by the way are not they are unsubsidized loans. So you have to pay interest on that. So subsidized you don't, but if you want to go for an advanced degree, that's considered a luxury. So if you get an advanced degree, I borrowed about $70,000 with master's and PhD because MU paid really crappy, and to pay fees and everything, you couldn't live off what they paid. So by the time though the interest from unsubsidized, my loan came out to $104,000. So since 2002, I've been paying $650 a month. And I think I calculated the other day, so far, I've paid $140,000, but I still owe $65,000 on my original debt.
So I completely agree about, like, you're talking about like a bigger holistic approach to what the purpose of higher ed is, right? And that's, we can debate that all day, but as long as loans are being given, the problem is every degree is not made equal, but the loan isn't given based upon the degree. So you come in, you want to go to UMR, you want to major in engineering, here's your loan, and then you go, actually, let me change my major, and I'm not going to say any majors because I'll probably pick, I'll probably offend somebody, but you pick a different major and the investment is not the same. Where else do we give loans in this society where you don't know, where the bank doesn't have a value, a good value on that? You don't go buy a home and then they value it at this, and then you can turn around and suddenly the value has halved overnight because one decision. Maybe the decision was to break out all your plumbing or something. But I mean, if we're still giving loans, that discussion about what you're buying and what you're getting out of it should be had, and the degree.
Those were implemented and mandated in the state of Missouri. I don't know because I haven't had a loan in a while, but you have to do the financial literacy. In our day, we had to watch a video. You had to talk to somebody to talk about what the loan meant. So in the beginning, they never did that. And I remember at Mizzou, that started in the 90s, where but first it was a video. You had to sit and watch a video. Now, is it a video or is it a human that talks to you?
You have to do a 30 to an hour web page fill out, and it's a master promissory note. I have about 4 different loans. One's for the spring semester. Some of them are just going to reoccur every year. You have to do one for each loan. You have to put your social security number in it.
I mean, but do they talk to you about the repayment and about what it will be in your future?
So it's kind of like you insert, it's a plus loan, it's a regular loan, it's an unsubsidized loan. What's the difference? You have to take a quiz, you have to watch a video, then you have to move on. You're like, okay, if we give you $1,000 and your interest is this much, how much would how much would your interest be? And they say, here's your federal loan servicer. They send you emails updating you. You get about like every 3-month update. I have Nelnet as my servicer. They email me all the time like, hey, we're your loan servicer. Here's your taxes. Here's an update. Here's how much you owe in interest. I know a lot of students who are working jobs, including myself, to start paying off our debt in college, because if we don't start now, you aren't paying it off.
Yeah.
There is no way that you can. And I know my best friend is going to WashU on a full ride. She's getting about $5,000 a semester to go there. And I look at her and I'm like, I wish I could do that. And she's like, well, there's so many scholarships out there. But then you have the fact that not all scholarships are created equal. There are some scholarships that are loans. SEMO offers about 2 that are like, you have to pay us back. That's not a scholarship, that's a loan. Because if I'm asking you for money, how can I pay that back to you if I'm in the state to ask you for it? I know that St. Louis is a great job. They have St. Louis Scholarship Central, where if you're in that area, they have a scholarship site just for St. Louis students, and they have interest-free loans, they have scholarships, they have apprenticeships, they have so much there. So I think that if we expand that statewide and give SEMO a SEMO Scholarship Central and say, hey, Cape students, rural students, this is for you. Because I'm privileged. I come from a big city, so like I have one. There are students who only have one Walmart. There are students who don't have a Walmart. All they have is a Dollar General. And they should not be in a worse state because they don't have the opportunity. And so I think that SEMO does a great job already. We have the Will to Do Award, where if you're under a certain amount of money, you pay $0.
Mhm.
And that just came out this year.
Mhm.
And do I qualify for that? No, but for those who do, I'm glad they can do that. But for everybody else, there still needs to be, that gap needs to be gone. Because we can't get education if we're too scared to afford it. I'm a political science major, so I'm a little bit scared because I have to have a higher degree to get a job. I just have to. There's no option. I can't work with a bachelor's unless I want to be under the poverty line. So I'm looking at this debt plus my master's debt plus my possible PhD debt plus the cost of living plus any other expenses, and I'm struggling with my debt now. So I agree with you with you're saying you can't define the value of your degree day to day, because healthcare majors, they're set, they're going to get hired. Nursing majors, they're good, they're going to get hired. Teachers, they're getting hired. Everybody except for certain areas, they have federal loan forgiveness programs for that. Like Teach for America, you can get your master's free. They have about 2 public loan programs. If you teach in an inner city school or a rural school for a few years, your debt's erased. School districts are paying for master's degrees, but everybody else is left out because our degree isn't conventionally useful, and so you just have millions of kids who aren't in those areas drowning in debt. And I think that America and Missouri should be focusing on how can we have these other degrees intersect with problems that we have so we can keep them here, because a lot of kids who graduate from Missouri don't want to stay here because they don't see futures here. I think that's also the problem, because we get the degree here because we can't afford it out of state, but once we have the degree, we're gone because there's nothing else here for us. That's how we see it. So I think we have to support staying here and growing that so we could get past everything else.
So,
If you don't mind real quick, I think in the idea of intersectionality of issues, I think we really need to shift how we look at higher education.
Mhm.
Because Kathy said it just now, going into trades could be an alternative education. But that's still looking at it as an education as something you do to get a job, rather than as something you get to be a more informed citizen.
Yes.
And that's something we're really lacking. We're lacking a dedication to the liberal arts.
Yes.
People no longer, I work with students all the time, and the biggest complaint I hear about SEMO is the general education system, which is probably the most valuable part of SEMO, that you're getting a broad and well-rounded education. But because we have shifted the idea of college and of higher education so much that you go solely to get a job, they don't see the value in that anymore, because it's getting in their way of being able to afford and continue on to a career.
Well, I think that with the trade system, some schools are doing it where if you're a sophomore and you have this GPA, we will send you to a trade school and the district will cover it. My school did that with Rankin. We had about 4 students come out with different certifications for trades. I wanted to be a pharmacy tech at some time, couldn't afford it. I went to the Hill. I asked a couple legislators saying, hey, is there a way that you can think about mandating that high schools and districts set aside money for making it possible so that you graduate with a degree in a trade? Because a lot of kids don't want to go to college because it is basically meant to get a job. And we're losing thousands of children who want to better themselves, but they can't because they don't want to be in a position where I'm taking 15 hours, 18 hours to get out as fast as possible so I can get a job so I can pay off my loans. And we should focus at the high school level on saying, can you get a job with a degree? Of course, you can. But if you want to be able to say that I spent an extra 4 years on my education figuring out why I am who I am and what I can do to improve this country, that's great too. But that's not how it is. Sadly, that's not how it is. And so I think that school districts in the state should do a better job at saying, here are other options besides a 4-year college that can get you the job you want, but will also give you that extra knowledge. And so I value certifications and trades. I wanted one myself, I couldn't afford it, but I've been fighting for other kids to have it. In fact, my senior class, we kind of fought our principal, because I went to a medical-based school. I went to the Collegiate School of Medicine and Bioscience, and by junior year, we were eligible to take a lab technician test. We had college credit for lab and everything, and it was paid for, but we couldn't afford the test, and so none of us got it at all. And you had about 45 students who could not get a certification leave that workforce permanently, because now we're like, we can't do that, because I'm in college now. There's no way I can afford that certification plus my degree plus my job that I use to pay for my degree, so I just can't do that option. And so unless you're going to community college, you don't really think about that.
I do want to put a pin in our discussion about student loan debt, because there are some other things I also want to get to, and it's super important, so I figured we'd spend quite a bit of time on this. But I do want to put a pin in that, and if we have time at the end, hopefully we can come back to it, because I do have some questions about community college and things that I think we will circle back to, but I want to put a pin in that discussion for now. So the next thing I want to Next thing I want to talk about is inclusivity. So part of getting that access, and we kind of touched on it a bit already, but part of getting that access is ensuring that all people have equal access to get into higher education. So you can speak from personal experience, students, things like that. So in what ways do you see that we can make improvements on being more inclusive, regardless of race, gender, orientation, religious beliefs, all those sorts of things? How do you see areas where higher education as a whole could do a better job of making sure that all students have access to education, not just those who fit a certain mold? Do you see areas where maybe we could do a little better with that?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I know in our department we really are working on recruitment, and not only just recruiting students, but to retain them once we get them. And that's where I was talking about, sometimes they access here, but then we don't keep them because they get lost in the shuffle, or they don't have a mentor, or they don't have someone. So we really are trying to do this recruitment where we're going to the high schools. We're at, matter of fact, I'm in education, so the Future Teachers of America, that organization which comes on our campus, will come on in March. All the surrounding areas, they come and really we're trying to link some college students with them, like as email buddies, like, ask me a question, and I'll tell you what I did, or don't do what I did, so that's one of our goals, to get that into education. We also, as a university, we went to a convention where there were all these high school students, and we were trying to tell what we were and how we could help and so forth. But I remember when it comes to minorities and so forth, and they come from a world that they may not have had access, you can't wait for them to come to you. You have to go to them. We have to go there. And do what?
Meet them where they are.
You have to meet them where they are, and really that they can do this, and it's not easy. It's not easy. They don't have that role model, or they don't have second generation. The ones that do are. I'm not speaking of them. I'm speaking of the ones that. I taught them back in junior high, and they were so much potential. And I'd say, they would actually go, and I would see them back at home, and I'd say, did you quit? And or are you home for spring break, or are you home? I didn't go back, Mr. Bohan. And I said, why? I didn't fit in there. I didn't go. So I think there has to be more connection once we get them. Nurture. You can't just be like, you're here, you'll do well, because they fall.
I think our college has made a concerted effort, our university, not just our college within the university, has made a concerted effort to support students that come from low income or high poverty background, diverse background. And some of the things that I know have been worked on to help students stay in school are time management, just learning time management. You have to be someplace on time, classes start at a certain time, faculty need you there when class starts. And that sounds like, for folks who come from a background where you have to be somewhere at a certain time, that sounds like second nature, but some of our students come to us not understanding that soft skill. And so we have tried, I think, made a concerted effort, I know in our department, to help our students with soft skills, time management, the way that you speak to people, the way that you present yourself. And then another thing that, our students, I think college is, Dr. Bohannon mentioned, we're actively recruiting, for diversity in all educators, so that, not every student, I'll just say, not every student is white, and, we need diverse educators. There was a problem with a new, test that came out, and it literally, for some reason, people with diversity, they were not passing this test at the same rate. And so our former dean advocated very hard to have that test looked at and was successful in that. And so, I think our college and our university is trying very hard to support students who come from diverse background, small towns. You know, we might not look at Cape as a big town, but to someone who does just have a Dollar General, it is a very big town. And I think we can always do a better job in that, but I think we're trying very hard.
Have you done anything with, the current students who would, you know, maybe form a task force and they would be responsible for going out and meeting with potential students throughout the area?
Okay, so we have secondary scholars and we have tomorrow's teachers that are their learning communities. And so the idea behind that learning community is when you come in as a freshman, you know, being a freshman from a very small town can be a very lonely experience. And a learning community has a group of students who take 2 classes together and they live together. And so they have study groups together and they support each other. And I was the sponsor for the secondary scholars, and then a person in Dr. Bohannon's department did the elementary portion. And then they consolidated that into one big group. And I still see those students. My group has graduated and they're gone. I still see some of the students that were in my last year for that on campus, and they're still very close. And so I see establishing a social support network as important as establishing understanding how grades are calculated, or, I mean, those types of things. I think soft skills is something our students that come from diverse backgrounds, high poverty backgrounds, don't understand, and or don't. They may have some, but they don't have everything they need, and that's something that we can always work on.
Do you think that some of the professors would benefit from trainings like racial bias or sexual orientation or identity?
Well, I think
like
we are getting that.
Oh, okay, good.
We get quite a bit of professional development as faculty, and at the beginning of each semester and then throughout the semester, we get quite a bit of professional development, and it's not, just because we're faculty, we have certain criteria we have to meet to keep our job, and one of them is maintaining current professional development training. So I think the university is doing a pretty good job.
I think in a lot of ways it's the staff who needs more training, and I come at this as a new staff member. We don't have professional development requirements, aside from the ones that we receive when we are initially hired. So people who have been there for 5, 6 years, beyond those first trainings that they get, they don't see anything. A lot of the trainings I was asked to do by my department aren't even standard requirements across the university. So my department asked me to attend a seminar on LGBTQ community in Cape, and not everybody's required to do that. There are staff and faculty who have outright refused to do so. So
Some of what we do is optional, like Friday, there's always a PD on Friday. We can choose to go to it or choose not to go to it, and everybody I work with chooses at least 1 or 2 things every semester to go to. And I think that's open to everyone.
So another angle on that also is just how the professors interact with each other, or administration interacts with professors. I have 5 African American friends who are no longer at the university because primarily due to the poor
requirement of last semester, and we had a teaching applied calculus. I was one of 2 black people in there. I was the only black woman, and I was one of 3 women in there, and one of them dropped halfway through the semester. And so I think that the attitudes towards that professor was towards like his accent or him not being like a normal professor, or oh, he's going too fast, what does he expect? And so I think that a lot of times students who aren't used to diversity use complaints for academics based off of who the professor is, and it makes it hard for students like me because when I went to my school, like even though I was in an inner city school, I still had 3 black teachers, and that was the largest amount of teachers I've ever had that looked like me at once.
Wow.
And that was for my entire 4 years, and I went to private school, public school, magnet school, like if you name it, I was in it. And coming here and seeing students just take out unneeded aggression on rarities in the education system frustrates minority students because now we don't have mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're lost and who's already awkward with us.
Right.
And it's just kind of frustrating. He's wonderful. Like I don't have to force anything because we can relate to each other based off of the academics. And so I think that we need to find more of those diamonds in the rough, those professors who will transcend any of these problems that we might have based off of my demographics and instead be like, okay, you have potential. I want to get you these internships. I want to get you all of these things that you should be able to get anyway, but you can't because you look like who you are. And so I think that we have to find those faculty members who want a deep connection, who aren't just here because they need to teach, who want to make friends and family besides the classroom. And I think that that also goes into departments and how they distribute opportunities. I'd like to say that career service is a great job, but the way that they distribute things aren't equal. You see more things for the science majors than for everybody else, and that's harmful because as a liberal arts major, if I don't find it by myself, I'm not gonna get it. And SEMO has the state capital internship, and that's great. And I'm kind of unique because I interned for 8 political campaigns before I came to SEMO. So like I could just text one of my bosses and they'd get me one. So like I kind of can't use that. But there are so many other opportunities. I wrote an email to my advisor and said, here's a list because we don't have one. And I shouldn't have to ask ahead of time for one. You should have that first thing when I walk in saying, hey, I saw these, you want to do these? But no, I have to ask you ahead of time and wait for 2 weeks for you to get back to me with the list that I might not even be qualified for. So I think that SEMO needs to do a better job across the department of saying, here are internships, here's scholarships, here's more opportunities so you can get where you are. Because the reason why we don't have a lot of kids coming here who may not look like me is because they don't see the value in a degree from here. Because they're like, oh, I can go to WashU, and there's a whole bunch of talented minority students there who get support. Because WashU is WashU. Like, they have an endowment, they have all this money. People go to Mizzou because there's football. There's a lot of African Americans there. So like, okay, there's more people like me, I can get together. But Cape is just kind of like, it's Cape. Like, I don't want to be that one person who looks like me in Cape. And like, there's nothing wrong with Cape. Like, as a person who's from St. Louis who came to Cape, Cape is great. I had a bad rep on it because I come from St. Louis and I was scared. But if we want to keep kids who look like me here, we have to give them that foundation saying, we want to support you. Here's what you need before you ask. Here's what you could have needed. Now that you've asked, let's go more in depth to it. So I think that that's what we need to do.
We call that equity.
Exactly.
Well, and I just want to, I feel obligated to say this, but we're looking, it's very easy because we're a room full of people that either have gone to SEMO or teach at SEMO. It's very easy to dogpile on just because of the nature of the room, but I do want to kind of take a step back and recognize that these are issues that we can address in universities across the state and across the nation. So just because we're addressing these issues at our university and there are things that we are doing really great and things that, I mean, just we can always work on. I mean, some of that is just human nature, like how we treat each other, and you can't exactly like just, you can't just use policies and things to change human nature, but I think it's always beneficial to be able to look at the policies that we do have or the policies that we don't have that can help minimize that. So even though we're looking, and I feel like we're just kind of like beating on SEMO, I don't want to be like I don't want people to feel like that's, you know, the goal here is to be able to look at what are we doing well, what can we do better, and how can we make sure that our universities across the state that have lots of other factors that go in, you know, the student populations, the economics of the area, because like you said, Wash U, just for an example, has a very different student population, a very different, you know, economic situation than we do here, and that's just a reality of it. And so we, you know, as students, as professors, and as alumni, we need to hold administration and professors accountable for their behaviors too, that, you know, that we're not going to tolerate, you know, bigotry of any form, and to hold people accountable for that. Because again, I mean, we can come up with policies and we can come up with trainings and we can do all of these things, but if we're not practicing it day in and day out, then there's no sense in doing all these trainings and doing all these things if we're not willing to put it into practice. And I think just holding people accountable for doing and, you know, holding people accountable for putting that into practice is just as important as attending trainings and attending, you know, board meetings and anything else.
And it shouldn't just be the professors, like, especially the higher up administration, like, should absolutely be held to a much higher standard than our professors are. Like, if we expect, yeah, like, oh no, I just mean, like, I'm thinking like deans, I'm thinking the president, and I think for the record, I think Vargas does a really great job. Like, but I just mean that I know, and I've heard stories of certain deans that in other departments that are not as like racially sensitive or as sensitive to certain minorities. So I think it's a culture issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that interpersonal accountability works best in those instances, and us being brave enough to say it to those people.
I think that my point about the soft skills, just the soft skills point is not just SEMO. That's number one request right now, and I like LinkedIn for connecting with other professionals. You can take professional development on LinkedIn. You can watch a video and look at scholarly research, data that backs up the research. Soft skills are one of the number one things that employers say people graduating from college right now do not have. And so soft skills applies everywhere, not just at SEMO. I mean, we have to teach people how to interact with each other, and that skill set somewhere along the way slipped through a crack. But I mean, I hear what you're saying. My department, we had an African American chair, Dr. Goss, and he advocated for everyone, and he was a mentor to many, and he passed away last fall. So our department has been very fortunate in having.
I want to piggyback on that, you know, because there's an audience sitting here, and I learn something new all the time being at university. I'm in education, and so when I hear this about minority, we are really want our minority teachers, because the students that are in our area need to see someone that's like them. So we really do mentor, and I would say we go the extra mile for diversity to help them be successful, because they know that they've got a lot of barriers. But then when I hear these other colleges, it's always interesting, because we think at our college that is the way it is everywhere. And then you hear this, and I'm a faculty senator, and have been for 12 years. So when I hear some of this, it is eye-opening, because, you know, and I can take back and say, well, you know, just because my college does it this way, we're very data-driven, because assessment. So we get that, we do that, but others, you know, maybe don't have, that's not their area or expertise. But so when I hear that some say that in the LGBTQ, yes, we are certainly aware of it, because how do we teach our teachers when they're going to have different children coming from different environments? So we have to include all of that. So it's been very enlightening for me just to be here to hear the different viewpoints and what's going on, and like administration needs to hear it, and the deans, and I think Rob and I would both tell you, I go to faculty senate and I say, well, we got to get these professors to use the grade book. Well, I'm just astonished because, you know, students can always see their running total in my grade. I thought it was an edict. I did not know it was a choice. I thought we all, so I put it, you know, my grades are there, and then you hear some people are not doing it, you're thinking, wow. So, there are.
We're required in ours.
Yeah, we're just requiring, we're thinking, that's not required of everyone, they're like, no. And so, you know, so I know there's differences, but to hear that, to hear the word administration and bigotry and all that's, I may be sharing some.
Well, typically the people that see it more often are the people that are oppressed. So, and they also are less likely to speak out about it, especially if they think that the culture is not like. I know that the 6 years I spent at SEMO, there was a good half of that I felt very uncomfortable being who I was or myself. So if that puts it in perspective, there's a lot of people that do carry some diversity or adversity in their background that they are very uncomfortable because they think, well, I've got to be proper, I've got to be a certain way, there's an expectation, and I just, you know, so.
Not to toot my own horn or our own horn, but I think having community forums like this is important so that you can hear from the community, this is what we are experiencing, because we can't all be in every department all the time.
Right.
So to be able to hear the stories from other people and, you know, students, faculty, and I mean, this is true of just about any organization really, that when you take a step back and you are able to hear from other people in the community and be like, wow, I had no idea that this was going on in that department, or that, you know, this was happening. I think that's why these experiences are so important, to be able to have that perspective. So I appreciate community sharing these things so that, you know, we can learn from it and do better. We are running short on time, so some of this stuff we've already covered, so I don't really want to double dip on some of this. Just briefly, this is an issue that I never really experienced necessarily on SEMO's campus, but I would like to open it up to see how you feel about the debate over safe spaces on campus. The idea that some speech should not be allowed in certain spaces, or that universities have a obligation to provide these safe spaces for students. Without putting anybody on the spot, do you feel like this is a priority, that universities should be looking into this, or do you feel that free speech should be more embraced, and that this is not something that we should be providing as far as like a safe space for people to just remove themselves from free speech that may offend them, or may, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, free speech that may upset them. So do you have thoughts either as a student or you definitely
I feel like safe spaces have kind of been demonized. I feel like safe spaces are necessary, especially when you have victims of trauma. I know about like 5 people off the top of my head who are victims of sexual assault, and when some areas of SEMO's extracurriculars decide to say certain things that they believe that aren't phrased in the right way to say it, that's upsetting. And so I think SEMO's doing a great job. I think that SEMO is able to handle it on the university level, but on like the individual organizational level, students and faculty members who sponsor clubs should deal with that. I think that, especially like when it comes to like minorities, because we don't want to say anything because we're already in a bad position. Like if I hear something that's off, I don't say anything. I just kind of like and walk away, because one, I don't want to get in a confrontation about it, because I might get targeted, or I might have someone else who's looking at me get targeted, or 2, they might want to debate me, and I don't have the mental energy to support that constantly, especially when there's only 1 or 2 black people in like my major classes. I'm not putting myself in that position to explain myself or justify my existence or my opinion to anybody. So I think that safe spaces are important, because in that space, you are free to shed whatever code switching you had or whatever persona that you walked into class with, and be able to not be stressed out. Because there is a constant stress on people who are diverse on this campus, either to fit in or to keep their scholarship or to have their teacher write them a recommendation letter, there is always a level of stress on them. And I feel like a lot of students would agree with me, because you can't be yourself if yourself would not be accepted. And it's just difficult, because a lot of us want to get jobs, we want to have internships, we want to get paid, we want to be able to be successful with our degree, and if we feel like we can't do that being ourselves, we hide it. And it's difficult sometimes hearing the debate about safe spaces, especially when people who come from a place of privilege say like, oh, you should have tougher skin, like it's not that bad, because they haven't been in the position where that speech might harm them specifically. And so I think that before we have any in-depth debate about that, we have to focus on how would other people who don't look like me be affected by a lack of safe space or a safe space. Because if you cannot partially guarantee someone's safety with the lack of, I'm talking about hate speech here. Like if we have someone on campus who is like far left or far right or far anywhere, and they are just not holding anything back, that's dangerous. Because that can inspire hatred, that can inspire bigotry, that can inspire violence, or whatever thing it can inspire is harmful for the students on this campus. And so the university has that obligation to prevent that from happening. Because if I get hurt because someone's out here doing all this, I will sue. Because if you knew ahead of time that this could happen, and if you chose to not prevent it, you are liable. Because I come here to get an education and to not be physically or mentally harmed constantly, so I will hold you accountable. So I think that that's important to realize.
The university doesn't see it that way.
I would be curious to see, I mean, we have professors on the panel who are sponsors for organizations that have student organizations on campus. Do you find that this is an issue that you've encountered in your organizations, that you felt that there needs to be this safe space created, or how do you see that?
Well, one of the professional developments that I went to was large bracket, and to that my listening to you is not that I'm agreeing with you, or that's my personal belief, or that's my religious belief, but I to learn to bracket it and set aside to listen, just to listen and see those everyone as a person, and that's what they're having. That's from where they come, and that's what they're with that what they're dealing. So that has really helped me because even in the classroom, you can see mostly, and I have to say, in education, like I said, we help each other. You know, we kind of help and hold and want everybody, you know, to make it through because we're teaching relationship building and all that, because that's what we don't want the future teachers to do with their students. But I see when people don't agree religiously, like there's something that, you know, and they really, you know, I can see that, and so I've used that bracketing, like you just have to listen, because everyone comes from a different thought process or feeling or orientation and so forth. So I think we're getting better with it, and a real shout out to the millennials. I think they're helping us move to that way. Whereas before, it was like if you listen to it, that means you agree with it, you know. And anyway, so when you say safe space, I also went to another workshop that was on discourse. Now, because this was from the Chicago University, they're called the Chicago University, and he said, we are the university in Chicago, and I'm like,
no entitlement there, right?
The University of Chicago. The University of Chicago. It's a private college, university, but that's the name.
I thought, oh, okay. But at first you're saying, oh, you're the one, but then they said, no, that's our name. But then they put out their discourse, and that we should be able to not agree, that that's what college is all about. I mean, that there should be a forum where you can say, I don't agree with that, and this is why, or I do agree with this and that's why. Because sometimes just the discourse, or discord, you grow. So, when you say safe space, are you talking about, what's your designation? What are you thinking about when you say that?
I think it shows up on different campuses in different ways. I think there's a lot of conversation that muddies the water in terms of, there's a difference between establishing a safe place, because I think as an education major, I learned that the classroom should be a safe space. If you are doing your job correctly as a professor, students should feel comfortable to be in that classroom, that their voice can be heard, and that if there's a disagreement, that we can deal with it. But I do think, building on Camille's point, that there is a difference between having a disagreement about something and using hate speech against someone. And I think that universities have a responsibility to
Curtail that, stop that.
To curtail that, and to have a system in place that if you use this language, there will be this set of consequences. A safe space in that sense that there are certain lines that we will not cross, that free speech at a certain point, and I think just as a nation, we have this too, but I think that there's been kind of this misconception about what a safe space is. I think a campus should be a safe space in the sense that we should be able to go and get an education without being harassed to the point of experiencing hatred.
And not wanting to come back.
Right, because you talked too about, some students, they will go to school and then they will just drop out. And I think that if you feel unsafe in your environment, then why would you go back to school? And if you don't see people like yourself, going back to the inclusivity, if you don't see professors or, staff members like yourself, and you don't feel safe to express things that have happened to you, because I think we're going to talk too about sexual assault here. But I think that if you don't feel safe to share your experiences and share what has happened to you, then there is no safety. And I don't think there was an image I was actually going to include that had it was like for babies, like a little baby pen. I think we get this idea that, it's a safe space where nobody's going to say anything offensive, but I just think that the campus has a responsibility to make sure that their campus is a safe place for people to go. And I mean, like I said, every university is different, different organizations within that university may have different policies, but when I think of safe space, I think that is something that the university has responsibility to take care of.
And how would the university put that out there in the safe space? Is it in a student handbook? Is it in the teacher faculty handbook?
Ideally, I think it should be both. I think that when you enroll to come to that school, you should know, whether it's through a student handbook or some agreement, that if I'm going to be a student of this university, these are the expectations that I have as far as, and this extends beyond just your speech, but your behavior too.
And it goes back to the soft skills. It's
right, that these things are not acceptable on our campus. And then the teachers too, that in the classroom, okay, you have some flexibility about what you will allow in your classroom, but as a university, as a professor in our university, these are these guidelines that we expect. If we are going to have a safe, I think the better word for it would be a safe campus. If we are going to have a safe campus, what does that look like? What speech are we going to allow, and what speech are we not going to allow?
If I might, as an old man, say something here. We used to call that common decency, to be a decent human being.
Unfortunately, we don't live
Or
in a
civility.
society.
Civility.
And I'm trying to get my head around what are you talking about? Because if I've done something like that, my parents would slap me upside the head, We were brought up to be decent human beings. That's a safe spot. Of course, I grew up in a small town and everybody knew everybody too, so. And I know I'm the picture of whiteness. I have not been oppressed, but I'm trying to, what's the problem here, Just be decent human beings.
And I think that does go into creating those policies of what does being a decent human being look like? Because again, my idea of what a decent human being is, in my my parents' idea, my grandparents, or, you know, depending on where you come from, we need a common idea, and I think the university level is a good idea as far as what is decent behavior, what crosses that line into. I mean, indecent behavior is, you know, that could just be being rude. Or what point does it become unsafe? What point does it become hate speech? And I think that that's why we need to have these conversations to decide what are we as a university, what are we as a society going to allow as far as what we're going to tolerate.
And basically, you know, the line is drawn is when another person feels threatened,
Right.
however they define that.
Right, and then there's some people that would say, well, why do you feel threatened by that? And then try to invalidate that. So that's why it's so important to have that in your policies that this is what.
Give an example. I think you give an example.
Example of something.
You know, I haven't got,
I
you
would
haven't,
say
you haven't
the
get all, like
library-
Terry got here, running around all the place.
So
You
Kent
haven't got
Library has,
anything.
a space that's a quiet space where students can go and have
Totally different.
whatever, form of religious prayer they need to have in that moment. So that is, a special room designated that some of the students asked for. And they found, a room where students of any religion could go and have, a quiet moment for prayer, for whatever religion they.
We have in the college
Yeah.
education a safe zone, that's what they're, and they have now put these emblems up so that
Yeah.
you walk by it, so I guess that is the area, but the thing that I'm having to ask some of this too, because I'm seeing it, but who has explained this to me? You know, where's the PD on this to tell us this is the room, this is where they can do this? Because I feel like in our day, bullying was a rite of passage, you know, to make fun, and if you were any what different or looked different, dressed different, sounded different, you know, there was this bullying. Now, when you look at public school, some of the people I grew up with would have been expelled, you know, some of it, because it was like freshmen just went through some of that to get to the senior year. So I think we've come away from some of that, can't name call, can't do some of this, but you're saying the hate speech is.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Every semester, or most semesters.
Oh, brother Jed.
Yes,
I remember
brother
him.
Jed. Every semester, a large people will stand there and yell slurs at students as they walk by. Last semester, he called several people prostitutes, told a young lady wearing a hijab that she's going to burn in hell. A bunch of variety of things that should not be spoken on a campus that is supposed to be safe, particularly with such heightened tensions towards, you know, with such Islamophobia going on in our nation. And when I was a
So
student.
do you not want him to come? You don't want him to be
Because
allowed to
he
speak?
espouses that hate speech.
Yeah, and the thing is that people have said that they feel unsafe on campus to the point that I think it wasn't last semester, but even Dean Rucker at one semester tried to have him removed, but the upper administration refused. And on the one
Freedom of
hand,
speech, you know, Tinker versus the Board of Education, I mean, we have so many things.
yeah, and that's what I was gonna say, is I know that that area is designated by federal law as a free speech. The university could not have legally taken action. But if we're looking at our university as a community and the community being a solution to some of our problems, then that's something we do need to look at as maybe being changed. I'm not saying that discussions like that, especially when they involve personal beliefs, religious beliefs, political beliefs, any kind of belief, they're always gonna be hard because there are gonna be people you disagree with. But the way I've always seen it put is the point at which you are trying to deny another person's human rights, the people who are arguing for genocide, enslavement, you know, labeling people, you know, going back to having people register cars for being of certain denominations or things like that, that's a problem because it's toxic to our community.
Well, and it's difficult when students are going into extreme debt in order to be here.
Yes.
And they're not warned ahead of time that you're going to be attacked in this way if you walk past this corner on this day.
Yes.
So afterwards, the president did send a very thoughtful, well-written email explaining what happened, but maybe we should have warned students ahead of time that this is going to be happening on this corner and this is why we can't control that.
And
But
in
when
the
students,
almost, when he's in his Midwestern tour, cause he goes all across the country,
This is not the
we're a
only
number
place
one
he does
spot for
this.
him. He comes here
So
specifically.
the next time he's coming, if those of you who know he's coming or that he's there, let us know, we will come. And we'll form a circle around him.
Well, I
And
will
we'll
say-
protect
Because what
the
he does is he
students.
wants to get hit so he can sue.
Yeah,
other
so
people.
we will come and we will form a barrier and protect the students. We will
It's
do
just that the university, I don't think we don't know what
Isn't
day he's
announced.
gonna be here.
No, but when he gets on
Okay.
campus, you call, we'll come. We can be there like that.
And
There's a difference in free speech, because he could be preaching against something that maybe you believe in, you think he's wrong, but he could be preaching, but to name call someone to walk by.
And that's
Yeah,
my.
that's that
He was
bullying
right
side.
by Kent. Like if you, like the UC is like right here and he was right on that corner. And I had to go to UI 100 that day and I was waiting at the shuttle stop and I just see this man.
We'll come.
And he's just yelling and screaming and you have legitimately students in groups crying, trying to like help other students get away from there because it's that harmful. That's a problem. And
Yeah, well-
DPS was like, we can't do anything. Like he.
But we'll come. We'll come in our collars and we'll come in our stoles. We'll come. We will show up for you. You let us know when to show up and we will show up.
And I will say, I was incredibly proud of our student community because they did exactly that. They formed a circle around him, and the LGBTQ community was a huge part of
They
that.
had flags. I remember it. They had
Yeah.
face paint.
So I mean,
He didn't get hurt, so that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
'Cause he was advocating for someone to hit him. He was like waiting.
But
Yeah.
that's what I think that's what we mean by hate speech and needing safe zones, is that, kind of like what you said, there are people who don't have any common decency anymore. It should be obvious that you should not call other people's names. You can have a discussion, you can agree to disagree, you can even argue about it, but when you start wishing ill upon people and advocating for ill upon other people, that's what people need to be protected from.
Well, it's
and,
terrible,
you know,
I can't say it out loud.
It happens in bigger university communities.
It's a safe
I
zone.
was at Harvard there for a
Protect your free
reason,
speech,
you know,
right?
it was,
I'll stand in a circle
but
and
anyway,
say it.
they have that quite frequently. And we're just not used to seeing that here, and it's finally arrived. And so it's uncomfortable for our community, because we're conservative in nature, you know, I mean, and it's just, we haven't had much experience with how to deal with it. And I think, you know, making sure that our administrators, you know those laws and they know where they can cross them, and then communicating that to all of the faculty and others. I mean, we, as a faculty member, I've never been sent anything, even on the Senate, as I've been on that off and on the past 35 years, we've never had this discussion, to my knowledge.
So, Zach, I wanna give you a different example than Brother Jed, but this was a learning opportunity for me, and this is me as a person who is affiliated with other universities besides SEMO, cause this isn't just, I think, a SEMO conversation, but I was raised in a place not Missouri, okay, Northwest, and I like to say, I don't care if someone is white, black, lesbian, gay, I don't care, okay? And so I have a friend at the university who is a member of the LGBTQ community, and she's a very good friend of mine. And she said, when you say you don't care, it's kind of invalidating my relationship. And she said, I don't think you know that that kind of hurts me. And I said, no, I don't wanna hurt you. I'm saying it makes no difference. And she said, so if you say that again, say it makes no difference to me, don't say I don't care. And so I think that is, I'm 55. That isn't the way someone has ever explained that to me before a year ago. And I really valued what this person said, because she taught me something, and there was no way, shape, or form did I mean to offend anybody. And I think that's a very honest conversation, and that was an important conversation for her and I to have. So I think that kind of education is very important, and because I really, it doesn't make a difference to me. Like I said to her, you don't care that that I'm heterosexual, I don't care you were a lesbian. She said, no, it makes no difference. And I said, you're right, it doesn't make a difference. And so I have personally practiced making a concerted effort to have that conversation if the opportunity arises, and to think about the way that people perceive what I say, because I really do not want to offend anyone. So when I hear you say safe space, safe campuses, maybe those kind of dialogues could happen with people who are students, who are like me from a very different place in here, or people who are in my age group who do not mean to offend.
I'll give you an example. One of mine was a student who was sexually violated, and she had just been through all that, so there were things where she didn't want people to come walk up on her. She didn't want people to really, and so, she would jump, and so actually she said, may I speak to you? And she told me, and she said, I just don't know if I can be in this placement you're putting me, because those are little people, and they hug on you, but I don't really want people touching me. And I'm thinking, well, first she just didn't tell me the part that why she didn't want it. She just told me she didn't want little people touching her. I said, you're going to be a teacher. I mean, they touch you, they hug you, they love you. And she said, we need to talk. So she told me. Well, then in my teaching, and she's 55, I'm 65, I just nonchalantly didn't think, I said, I got another meeting, I could just slip my wrist. And that's just a saying that I heard, like to be funny, and she came up to me, she goes, Dr. Wynn, I can't believe you said that. And I said, what is that? She said, you said slit your wrist. And I said, I never thought of that. I had that all through all my career. People would say, oh, another meeting, I can just, like I don't want to be through it. And she just said that there are people that have slipped their wrist or have wanted to, and here you made it like. So that was a training that I needed. So I think that safe zone or safe school, I think sometimes we're doing things that we don't even know were offensive. For example, we use this one. I went to a parent, a white parent, had a little girl. She was only young. She called another little girl that was black an N-I-G-T-E-R. And the parent looked at the teacher and said, she didn't mean it. She didn't mean it. Well, of course she didn't know it because she's 3 or 4 years old, but she heard it. So there had to be a teachable moment that, this culturally responsive, that child either, and it doesn't mean the parents did it because the mother was so embarrassed, but it could be television, whatever, but there was a time and it needed to be addressed.
It's in versus in that.
Well, and I think that owning and accepting that we can always learn from each other, even if it's a difficult conversation, those conversations are happening. I think those conversations are happening.
Right, and I think that's really the goal of a safe space, is that those moments can't happen if we don't establish that you will be safe in this place. You can't have a discussion about learning from your experiences if people don't feel comfortable to share those experiences, if they don't feel comfortable. But we're going to have to end it there. I do want to take this opportunity to thank my panelists for coming and speaking with us. And I want to thank our community members for coming and engaging in this conversation as well. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
I would like to make a suggestion that at some point we pick up some of these questions again and maybe do the second part of this forum. Because there's a lot more really important stuff that I think that we need to bring out in the open, not just for this area, but for our entire state and country. We need to have these difficult discussions. I had to laugh the other day. I saw there was a workshop for continuing education for my social work credential conversations. And I'm like, shouldn't we as therapists be doing that already? Apparently not.
It's ramped up.
Yeah.